The room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of a DJ setting the mood. It was one of those evenings where everyone seemed relaxed, where the promise of a good time hung heavy in the air. Balloons floated lazily against the ceiling. The smell of bar food wafted through the hall. And Charlotte, everyone called her Charlie, was at the center of it all, glowing with attention. It was her birthday party, her big 25th celebration, and the club hall was packed with friends, family, and co-workers, all buzzing around her like bees to honey. And then Tom, her husband, took the microphone. No one suspected a thing. He looked calm, almost too calm. The way a man looks when he's about to tell a heartfelt story. His voice carried easily through the speakers as he thanked everyone for coming. Guests quieted down, leaning in. Everyone expected a toast, maybe a sweet slideshow of memories, something sentimental to cap off the night. And in a way, that's exactly what they got, until it wasn't. But before I tell you what happened in that room, let me take you back. Because revenge stories aren't just about the ending. They're about the journey, about the pain that pushes someone past their breaking point. Tom had always been the kind of guy people underestimated. Not flashy, not loud. He was steady. A good man. I knew him because I'd been a coach at the local club for years, and I'd watched him grow up. He wasn't a star athlete or some smooth-talking heartbreaker. He was the kid who worked harder than anyone else, who'd stay after practice to help put away equipment, who treated everyone, teammates, strangers, even rivals, with the same quiet respect. When he met Charlotte, it was like watching one of those teen romance movies where the underdog finally gets noticed. She was magnetic, the type of girl who could walk into a room and instantly command it, the kind who always had a circle of people laughing at her jokes, the one guys would line up to buy drinks for. To a lot of people, she seemed out of Tom's league. And maybe that's why, when they got together, everyone was genuinely happy for him. It felt like proof that good guys didn't always finish last. Their relationship moved fast. Too fast, some whispered. But Tom was head over heels. He adored her in a way that almost hurt to watch. He was the guy who'd leave work early to surprise her with takeout, who planned little weekend trips even when money was tight, who bought her flowers just because. And Charlotte? She played her role well, at least at first. She smiled for the photos, clung to his arm at parties, told everyone how lucky she was to have found someone so kind, so stable. But behind that polished exterior, cracks were forming. I don't think anyone truly knew Charlotte the way Tom thought he did. There was a restlessness in her, a hunger for attention that one man, no matter how devoted, could never satisfy. She thrived on being desired, on being pursued. And while Tom believed he was enough, Charlotte quietly decided he wasn't. The wedding had been beautiful. A big affair full of laughter and dancing. I remember Tom looking at her like she hung the moon. That look never left his face during the entire ceremony, or through the honeymoon photos they later shared, smiling together on beaches, wrapped up in each other's arms. To the world, they were the perfect couple, but the truth was brewing under the surface. Tom worked hard, maybe too hard. He was building a life for them, making sure they had stability, a future. Charlotte, meanwhile, basked in the attention of her co-workers and friends. She liked being adored. She liked the thrill of flirting, of knowing she could still turn heads. And soon enough, she let that thrill carry her straight into an affair. No one suspected it, not yet. Not until that phone incident that would change everything. It happened just days before her birthday. Tom, in his usual rush to catch the train, accidentally grabbed Charlotte's phone instead of his own. Same model, same case. It was an honest mistake. He didn't even notice until he was halfway to work, scrolling absent-mindedly and realizing something was off. Then came the call. Charlotte's voice was sharp, frantic. "You've got my phone, bring it back now." But Tom was already too far gone. "I can't," he told her, glancing at the time. "I'll be late for work. Just give me your passcode, I'll keep it safe until tonight." There was a pause on the other end. Then she said no. Flat out no, and that's when Tom's gut twisted. Because here's the thing, Tom had never hidden anything from her. She had his code, his passwords, his entire trust. So why was she panicking? Why was her voice trembling as if he was holding a ticking bomb instead of a phone? That was the moment the seed of doubt was planted. But it wasn't just doubt. Tom remembered something else, something small but nagging. That morning, as the phone buzzed on the nightstand, he'd glimpsed a message notification, just a sliver of text on the lock screen. And it was not the kind of message a husband should ever see. Too intimate, too suggestive. Now, with Charlotte refusing to hand over the code, Tom's mind spiraled. He wanted to believe in her. God, he wanted to believe. But the harder she tried to pull the phone back, the more certain he became something was wrong. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, his imagination filled in the blanks, faces, names, what? If she was talking to someone he knew? What if the life he'd been building was already a lie? Tom wasn't the kind of man to give in to paranoia, but pain changes people. Heartbreak reshapes them. And with trembling hands, he made a decision. If Charlotte wasn't going to give him the truth, he'd find it himself. And it wasn't hard. The internet is full of tutorials, guides, little loopholes that let you peek behind digital curtains. Within hours, he had access. And what he found shattered him. There they were. Messages, long threads of them, full of words no husband should ever have to read. The way she laughed about him behind his back. The way she called him boring, predictable, a safe bet. Screenshots of conversations dripping with lust, affection, and worst of all, contempt for the man who loved her. There were pictures, too. Videos. Blurred, grainy, but unmistakable. Proof. And Tom's heart broke in silence. Imagine sitting alone in the dark, scrolling through proof of your partner's betrayal. Your chest tight, your throat dry, your hands shaking so badly you can barely hold the phone. Part of you wants to throw it across the room, but another part can't look away. That was Tom, trapped in a loop of devastation, shame, and fury. But here's where the story takes a turn. Most men, faced with that kind of pain, would confront her in private. Maybe scream, maybe cry, maybe pack their bags. Tom, he chose something else, something colder. He didn't say a word to Charlotte. Not yet. He swallowed the rage, the heartbreak, and wore a mask of calm. Because in his mind, the birthday party wasn't just going to be her celebration. It was going to be her reckoning. And that's exactly what he planned. Tom didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, living room with nothing but the glow of Charlotte's phone burning. Into his eyes, his chest tight like a vice was clamped around it. Every time he thought he'd seen the worst of it, another message popped up in the chat history. Another insult, another photograph, another promise of a secret meeting. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself, it was in the words. She had mocked him. She had typed in cold, unforgiving text bubbles that he was boring, that he was safe, that he didn't excite her the way her coworker did, that she'd married him because he was predictable and wouldn't cheat, not because she truly wanted him. Tom stared at those words until they blurred. And then the tears came, quiet, bitter tears that streaked down his face while the clock ticked, mercilessly in the background. How could she? After everything he'd given her, his trust, his loyalty, his future. He thought about the honeymoon, the vows they'd spoken in front of family and friends. He thought about the nights he stayed, up late to finish work so they could afford their apartment. The little sacrifices he'd made without ever expecting a thank you. It was all a lie. By the time the sun broke through the blinds, Tom was a different man. The pain was still there, raw and jagged. But it had cooled into something sharper, clarity. He knew what he had to do. Confronting her one-on-one would accomplish nothing. She'd cry, make excuses, spin the narrative until he was the villain for invading her privacy. No, if she was going to betray him so openly, then her truth needed to be revealed openly too, and what better stage than the one she'd chosen for herself? Her birthday party? The idea hit him like lightning. The party wasn't just a celebration anymore. It was going to be her trial. And Tom wasn't going to argue or shout. He wasn't going to lay a hand on her or fall into the trap of looking unstable. No, he was going to let her own words condemn her. But to pull it off, he'd need to plan carefully. Over the next few days, Tom carried himself with a mask of calm. He kissed Charlotte goodnight, asked her about her day, even made her coffee in the morning. She never suspected that behind his tired smile, he was replaying every detail of his plan. The first step was evidence. Screenshots of the messages weren't enough. He needed context, enough proof that no one in that room could deny what she had done. So he spent hours curating everything. Threads of conversations, Blurred out but unmistakable images, timestamps that lined up with nights she had told him she was working late. It was meticulous, painful work. Every time he looked at her words, her little heart emojis, the pet names she gave to another man, it was like reopening the wound. But the more it hurt, the more determined he became. The second step was presentation. He couldn't just stand there and rant, it wouldn't land. He needed to draw the audience in first, to get them on his side emotionally before he lowered the hammer. And that's when the slideshow idea came to him. Tom had always been sentimental. He loved taking photos, loved documenting milestones. He had albums full of birthdays, holidays, and random candid moments with Charlotte. Why not use that? Why not build a story of their relationship? Show the highs, the laughter, the love, and then, when everyone's guard was down, when the tears were already flowing, flip the script and reveal the truth? It would be perfect, heartbreaking, brutal, but perfect. So he began editing. He strung together old clips of Charlotte's childhood birthdays he'd gotten from her mother. He added photos of their wedding, their honeymoon, the little vacations they'd taken together. He set it all to music, soft, nostalgic tracks that would tug at the heartstrings. And then, right at the peak of emotion, he inserted the record scratch, a jarring, old-school effect that would stop everyone cold. From there, the tone shifted. Screenshots of her messages appeared one after the other, stark against the screen. Blurred-out images followed, enough to leave no doubt. And finally, the pièce de résistance, his closing line, delivered with a calmness that would sting more than any scream ever could. To make it airtight, he looped his brother into the plan. He needed someone he could trust to hand him the final envelope at the right moment. Inside it was the divorce paperwork he'd quietly prepared with a lawyer just days before. It was a symbolic gesture as much as a legal one. He wanted Charlotte and everyone else to understand that he wasn't clinging, wasn't begging. He was done. The days leading up to the party were surreal. Tom went through the motions like an actor in a play. He sat at dinners with Charlotte, listening to her talk about decorations and guest lists, all while knowing the storm he was about to unleash. Sometimes he almost slipped. Sometimes the anger bubbled up so fiercely he wanted to scream right then and there. But he didn't. He swallowed it, saving every ounce of that energy for the main event. Meanwhile, Charlotte remained blissfully ignorant. She fussed over her dress, sent out reminders to friends, and texted her affair partner in secret. Tom knew. He saw the notifications, the sly smiles when she thought he wasn't looking. But he let her dig her own grave. And then finally the night arrived. The hall buzzed with chatter as people filtered in. Charlotte looked radiant in her birthday dress, laughing with her friends, hugging relatives, soaking up every ounce of attention. Tom moved through the crowd like a shadow, greeting people, shaking hands, smiling when he had to. Inside, his heart pounded, not from nerves, but from the anticipation of what was coming. He glanced at his brother, who gave him a subtle nod. The envelope was ready. The projector was set up. All that was left was to wait for the right moment. And as the night wore on, drinks flowing, music playing, Charlotte basking in her role as the star of the evening, Tom quietly rehearsed the words he would say when the time finally came. This wasn't going to be an outburst. It was going to be an execution. And the blade was already sharpened. The birthday party was in full swing by the time. Tom glanced at his watch and realized the moment was near. Drinks had been flowing for hours, and the room hummed with the cheerful energy of 100 people, gathered to celebrate one woman. Charlotte was the star of the evening, holding court at the center of the hall. Her laugh rang out above the music, bright and confident, the kind of laugh that made people turn their heads just to be near her. She looked radiant. That was the cruel irony of it. She was dressed in a shimmering gown that hugged her figure perfectly, hairstyled to perfection, makeup glowing under the lights. She greeted each guest as though she were royalty, soaking up the attention like a queen on her throne. Tom watched her from across the room, studying her carefully. The way she leaned into her friends, the playful flick of her hair, the smugness that hovered just beneath her smile. It was all a mask. To everyone else, she was the devoted wife and the life of the party. But Tom knew the truth. And tonight, everyone else was going to know too. The DJ lowered the volume as Tom walked toward the stage area. The microphone sat there waiting for him. He picked it up with steady hands, his expression calm, almost gentle. The chatter quieted as people turned to face him. Charlotte's smile widened, assuming he was about to give her a heartfelt toast. She even clasped her hands together, eyes glistening with anticipation. Tom cleared his throat. "First off," he said, voice carrying easily through the speakers, "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Charlotte deserves a celebration like this, surrounded by the people who love her." The crowd erupted in cheers. Charlotte blushed, pretending to act humble, though you could see how much she was basking in it. Tom let the applause settle before continuing. "Now," he said, his voice softer, "I wanted to do something really special for her, something she'd never forget. So, I put together a little trip down memory lane." At that cue, the lights dimmed slightly, and the projector flickered to life. A montage began to play, photos of Charlotte as a child. Birthday parties with cake-smeared smiles, family vacations, clips of her teenage years surrounded by friends. People laughed, clapped, wiped away nostalgic tears. Charlotte covered her mouth, overwhelmed, her eyes shining as she looked at Tom with what seemed like genuine gratitude. Her friends hugged her, even her grandmother, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The slideshow moved forward. Wedding photos, their honeymoon clips, romantic beach sunsets, playful selfies of the couple. The music swelled, soft and sentimental. The room was filled with warmth, with the illusion of love, with the picture of a perfect marriage. And then, the sound of a record scratch shattered the moment. The screen froze on a shot of Tom and Charlotte kissing on a beach. Then it flickered, and the next image appeared. It wasn't a wedding photo. It wasn't a family snapshot. It was a screenshot, a text message conversation. "Last night was amazing," one line read. "He has no idea." The room went silent. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Charlotte's smile faltered. Her hands dropped from her mouth. The slideshow continued. More screenshots, messages full of pet names and intimate language, written in Charlotte's unmistakable style. Another image, blurred but undeniably explicit. A time-stamped chat from nights she had claimed to be at work. Gasps filled the hall. People shifted in their seats, jaws dropping. Friends turned to one another, whispering. Charlotte's face drained of color. "Tom," she stammered, stepping toward him. "Stop this. This isn't funny." But he ignored her. The slideshow rolled on. More screenshots, more proof. And then, perhaps the cruelest blow of all, a message from Charlotte mocking Tom himself. "He's so boring," she had written to her lover. So predictable. "He'll never find out." The crowd's sympathy shifted like a tide. You could see it in their eyes as they turned from Charlotte to Tom. The pity, the anger, the disgust. Charlotte's friends, once glued to her side, now stared at her in shock. Her parents looked horrified. And in the corner, a man, her co-worker. The other man slipped toward the exit, head down, face burning. Tom let it all play out in silence. He didn't need to scream. He didn't need to cry. The evidence spoke louder than any words ever could. Finally, the slideshow ended. The screen went black. The room hung in stunned silence. The only sound Charlotte's ragged breathing as she tried to form excuses, her hands trembling. Tom raised the microphone again, his voice calm, almost conversational. "So, imagine my surprise," he said, "when I accidentally took her phone to work and she refused to give me the password. I had nothing to hide. She has access to mine, but me? Apparently I wasn't afforded the same trust." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Charlotte shook her head violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Tom, please, this isn't—" But he cut her off. "What you've all just seen is only a fraction of what I found. And let me be clear, I never wanted to do this. I wanted a marriage built on trust, on love. But I guess Charlie here wanted something else." He turned to the crowd, his expression hardening. "I thought long and hard about how to handle this. Should I walk away quietly? Should I confront her in private? But then I realized if she could humiliate me in secret, then she could damn well face the truth in public." A murmur of approval rippled through the guests. Some nodded. Some even clapped softly. And then Tom delivered the final blow. He motioned to his brother, who stepped forward and handed him a white envelope. Tom held it up for all to see, then handed it to Charlotte. Her shaking hands fumbled with it, tearing it open. Inside was the first set of divorce papers. Gasps again. A low, stunned silence fell over the room. "I think you can go home with whoever you want, Charlotte," Tom said evenly. "But we're done." He let the microphone fall from his hand. The heavy thud echoed through the hall like a gavel slamming down in a courtroom. And then he walked away, calm, collected, his brother at his side, his parents following behind him, his closest friends trailing after. The room was chaos in their wake. Charlotte collapsed into sobs, her family rushing to her side, trying to spin the narrative, trying to paint her as the victim. But the damage was done. The images were burned into everyone's minds. The whispers had already started. And Tom? He didn't look back, not once. That night his world ended. But in another way it also began. The night of the birthday party became the stuff of legend in their town. By the next morning, word had spread like wildfire. People who weren't even there seemed to know every detail, how Tom had stood on stage, calm and composed, while Charlotte's carefully constructed world shattered around her. Charlotte tried to get ahead of the story. She called her closest friends, sobbing down the line, insisting it was a misunderstanding, that the texts were taken out of context. She even claimed that Tom had fabricated some of the evidence, splicing together random messages to make her look guilty. But people weren't buying it. The screenshots had been too specific, the images too explicit. Her co-worker, the man she'd been having the affair with, avoided her like the plague after that night. His wife found out as well, and soon enough he was facing his own hell at home. He stopped showing up at social events, transferred departments at work, and kept his head low. Charlotte, however, couldn't hide. Her social circle shrank overnight. People she had once charmed now avoided her calls. Friends who had toasted her at her birthday slipped away, embarrassed to even be associated with her. The pity she received was cold, the kind reserved for someone who had destroyed themselves. For Tom, the following days were strange. The house felt different, quieter, heavier, yet somehow lighter at the same time. Charlotte had moved out within a week, taking only what she could fit into her car and leaving behind boxes of things. Tom hadn't bothered to sort. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't even sad. He just felt done. When the divorce papers were officially filed, Charlotte tried to fight back. She wanted to negotiate, wanted to cling to some shred of control. But Tom had been meticulous. He had everything documented. Her texts, her late-night absences, even the receipts that contradicted her stories. Her lawyer tried to spin it, but the evidence was undeniable. The settlement was swift. Tom kept the house, most of the assets, and more importantly, his dignity. Charlotte walked away with far less than she had hoped for. She looked broken in the courthouse, eyes hollow, makeup smeared, a shadow of the confident woman she once projected. Tom didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Her downfall wasn't his victory. It was just the natural consequence of her choices. The community, however, wasn't so forgiving. At family gatherings, her name became taboo. At social events, whispers followed her. Even her parents struggled with the shame, unable to defend her actions in front of others. She became that woman, the cautionary tale everyone referenced when speaking about betrayal. Tom, on the other hand, found unexpected support. Neighbors brought him meals. Friends invited him out more often, trying to keep his spirits up. People he hadn't spoken to in years reached out with words of encouragement. It wasn't that they were celebrating his pain. It was that they respected the way he had handled it. Calm, dignified, without resorting to pettiness. Still, the nights were hard. Tom would lie awake in the house that felt both familiar and foreign. He would think about the laughter they once shared, the trips they once planned, the life they had built together. He questioned himself endlessly. Was he blind? Was he too trusting? Had he missed the warning signs that everyone else claimed were obvious? But then he would remember the slideshow, the texts, the photos, the mockery, and the doubt would fade. Because no matter what mistakes he had made, he didn't deserve that. Months passed. The pain dulled. He started going to the gym more, throwing himself into routines he had neglected. He reconnected with old hobbies, photography, hiking, playing guitar, things that made him feel alive outside of a relationship. Slowly, he rebuilt himself. One day, a year after the party, He ran into Charlotte at the grocery store. She looked different, tired, older somehow, though not much time had passed. Her eyes darted around nervously as though she feared everyone was watching her. She approached him hesitantly, clutching her basket like a lifeline. "Tom," she whispered, her voice small. "Can we talk?" He looked at her for a long moment. This was the woman who had once held his heart, who had once been the center of his world. Now she was a stranger. "There's nothing left to say," he replied softly. And he meant it. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes, and walked away. Tom didn't feel anger. He didn't feel satisfaction. He just felt free. In the months that followed, Tom's life only improved. He made new friends, traveled to places he had always put off, and eventually he met someone new. This time he moved slowly, carefully. Trust would never come easily again, but he was willing to try. Charlotte, from what he heard, bounced from one failed relationship to another. Her reputation never fully recovered. She was a ghost in the very circle she once dominated. Tom never wished her harm. In fact, he hoped one day she'd find peace with herself. But that was no longer his burden to carry. Because for the first time in years, Tom was living for himself. Not for appearances. Not for someone else's approval. Just for him